So this is just a quick video showing you the overview of Maya 2018, something that you're going to get very familiar with. And this video is just for people who've never used it before, or if you're transitioning from Maya 16 or Maya 17 into the new version. So when you first open up Maya, you'll be greeted with this screen. You will have a little dialog box that pops up as well. I've just deleted, closed that on this version, but this is what you're going to see. In the middle of the screen, this little blue area, this is called the viewport. This is where we're going to see everything that we'll be creating, all the models and textures and the lighting is going to be seen in this view. And then surrounding it is all the various different ways we can affect the scene and create what we want in the actual viewport itself. So at the very top of the screen, you're going to see we've got the standard sort of part of any sort of program window. We've got file, edit, create, select, all that. So this is just a bunch of menus. The first few are standard. You've got your file, which contains your new scene, your open scene, your saves, imports, and other kind of functions that are used inside Maya. Edit is just ways of editing sections of the actual scene or geometry, so copy, paste, cut, delete, and different ways to delete, and different objects to delete. Duplicate with a special, which we'll go over in class, ungroup and parent. Next to that is create, and this is where we can actually go in there and find the different primitives we want to create. So NURBS and polygons, our volumes, our lights, our cameras, and our curve tools. And then we've got our type creation, we've got our SVG creation, so we can actually make 3D type. And we can actually use vector graphics to generate a path, or use a path generated through vector graphics to create geometry. The same as our Adobe Illustrator object, and different ways we can like measure in the scene, use locators, image planes, select different ways we can select things. So these are all very, very common settings that you'll, or menus that you'll use time and time again. Now, one special thing about this menu set here is we've got like file, edit, create, select, modify, display, windows, mesh. These first few here from file up to windows will always be there. But everything after this, like mesh, going up to generate and cache, they can all change depending on this little menu here, where currently it says modeling. If we click this little arrow and drop it down, we've got modeling, rigging, animation effects, rendering, and customize. So these are all different menu sets we can have. So this here at the minute is a modeling menu set. This is everything we can do with our mesh. Our scene physically is inside here, so we can get all our different tools in these menus. And there are a lot of different functions we can do, and it might seem a little bit overwhelming at first, but it's really, really simple. You'll come to find that a lot of these, some of them you'll very rarely use, and some of them you'll use so often that it'll become second nature. But exploring these tool sets is really fun, and just seeing what things can do. So if we actually change this to say rigging, you can see here now from Windows, so skeleton up to cache, this is all different. So skeletons, skin, deform, constrain, these are all things, all our tools we can use to create a rig for either a bipedal character, a quadrupedal character, maybe some form of simulation. This is all stuff we can create here, and then change it to animation. These are all tools that can be used within animation, including our Mesh Editor, which is a very cool plugin. The effects, so different ways of creating like fluids and cloth and hair and constraint dynamics. Our solvers are effects, and again, Mesh is included here. Rendering, which we're going to be using a lot. Excuse me. Here we go. We're going to be using a lot just to make our scenes look extra nice. All inside here, and you can even customize. So if you want to actually set up your own bespoke menu set here, you can come in and actually give yourself a new menu set and then add the required menus and options you want, which is very, very cool. Maya is incredibly customizable when it's menu sets and it's quick menu set here. So that's what this little box does, and you can see here it has a direct effect on this menu up here. Everything here, again, a little shortcut, so everything is included within these menus is included on this little strip here. So these first 5 here are new scene, open scene, save scene, undo and redo. So they're very, very basic tools. Then we've got a select by object or select different parameters. These little dividers in between as well, if we click those, they actually collapse, so we can actually collapse what we don't want to use and extend what we do want to use, so we're not having a very cluttered workspace. Maya can get very cluttered from time to time if you're not careful. So if you do miss a menu or something, just look what this little icon's doing. If it's got a little arrow on it, it means it's collapsed. If it's like a little block like this, it means it's extended. So here we've got different ways we can select objects. We've got component mode. Which one's this? This is a hierarchy selection. And then we've got the object selection type, and then we've got the component mode. So again, rarely do you actually use any of these, but if something's acting a little bit funky in the scene, this is just a good area to check. And inside lesson, you will mess up, you will do something wrong, which is totally cool. We want to do that. We want to make as many mistakes as we can to learn from them. So quite often you've accidentally selected one of these and you can't select the object how you want to select it. Next to it, that's just collapsed for me here, is just again different ways, different component we can select. So there's like the handle of an object, the rigs. So if just this was highlighted, then I'd just select the rigs. If just this was highlighted, I'd just be selecting curves. So we've got handles, which are used in rigging or simulation. We've got the actual rig of the joints, a skeleton. We've got curves, which we'll be using a lot of. They're just ways of generating, or things we can use to generate paths for animation, or things we can use to generate things like pipes or rope. Then we've got the polygon or the surface area, which is a NURBS-based object. Then we've got the deformation object here. Then we've got the particle or dynamic object here, and then we've got the rendering object here, and then we've got a miscellaneous tab here. Besides the animators, I don't see the first years especially using this. The second year game art people will be use this for part of the rigging, and so will the game design, but generally I have this collapsed always because I never use it. Right next to it here we've got these little magnets with these little blue icons next to it. These are all different ways we can actually move stuff around the scene or snap certain things to the scene, and I'll demonstrate that later on. They're very, very useful. So this first one here allows me to snap to the grid, so all the point where these little grey lines intersect to this little point here, I could like snap to there. Snapping to a curve, which is very useful, and we will be doing things for that. Snapping to points, it's like a vertex. Snapping to the projected center of stuff, which is very useful. Snapping to a view plane, which I rarely use, but I've seen people, especially animators, use it. And selecting an object to become a live object, which is what this is here. Again, this is the culprit of sometimes a bit of confusion of why you can't select certain assets or meshes within the scene. You might have accidentally turned this on, and it will say here was no live object. It'll say like PCube1 or poly whatever. And this is used for when we are retopologizing objects. So for my second years, this is used a lot when we take a sculpt and we actually bring the poly count down, and we actually make it usable in games. So next to that is symmetry. So this is just different ways we can actually have objects in the scene react. So symmetry at the minute is off. So if I select something on this side of the mesh, if it's a perfectly symmetrical mesh, then nothing's going to be selected on the other side. But if I change this down to, say, object X, this will then turn symmetry object X, which down here, which I'll go over in a bit, this little icon, this little gimbal here, it will select the opposite on the X-axis. So if I select something over here, it's going to select something over here if the mesh is symmetrical. Here we have the inputs and outputs for objects. This is very rarely used for the first years and even for the second years. It's commonly used for the animators for doing stuff like rigs and setting up render paths. Here we've got different ways we can affect the rendering. So we've got our render the display image. Then we've got render the current frame, which again is good for animators. And then we've got our IPR render of the current frame, which is set to Arnold, which is our proprietary rendering engine, which is a really good renderer. And then we've got the rendering settings, which are very useful to go through. And then this little ball here is our hypershade, or our shading network. And this shows us how the different materials we can use. Again, really good for animators because they'll be rendering inside the engine. For game people, it's just good to check if something's looking cool, if it's got a specular map to it, making sure that our specular map is actually working. Setting up rendering scenes inside Maya as well, we'll be using that just to make sure that our ambient occlusion is working. If you're doing everything inside Maya, if you're taking it out to a separate rendering engine or you're taking it out to game, you don't necessarily have to worry about it too much. But it's good to know how to use it because it just makes you a stronger artist. And then we've got our rendering layers here, which is, again, this is more for animation or even for VFX and post-production. This is the different things we can render paths and render at different. Instead of rendering everything at the same time, you'll render things in certain orders to, one, alleviate your rendering time, and to, two, make sure that everything is being rendered properly. And then we've got our same thing with our lighting editor. So all the lights we bring in the scene, we can basically have a drop down of everything. So if you're using one light in the scene, that's fine. But if you're using a full-on lighting rig, almost like a photography studio lighting rig, then this is really useful because you can quickly access all these different lights. At the minute it is empty, obviously, there's no lights in the scene, but this would have all your lights, their intensity, the color, exposure, the samples, the different lights we can use. It's a really, really powerful tool, and obviously the properties for the specific light you would have selected. Cool. And then here is just pausing the viewport renderer. So the collapse menu here is something I very, very rarely use. It's menu of input line options. It's saying here. I never use these. I've never had to use these. This is more like a technical side of Maya. And then we've got the sign-in, which is just you're signing into a personal account, which I am not in. And then these little icons here, like this little cube, this little person, this little input, this little hammer, and this little stack of paper. This is all connected to the to the right side of the screen, which I'll go over in a bit when I'm actually over at the right side. So underneath this line is this bunch of menus. So here, curve, surface, poly modeling, sculpting, rigging, animation, rendering, all the way across here. These are all the commonly used functions within this tool set. So here we've got our base primitives. There are more primitives than this. You can see here that if you go to polygon primitives, we've got this whole list of stuff. But up here, oops, I've just done something there. We've just got the spherical, cube, pyramid, or cone, cylindrical, torus, plane, and then we've got a disc. We've got a platonic solid, and then we've got a super shape, which I've never actually used these two successfully, but I can see the uses which I will probably come to use for my game art and game design students. And then we've got the create 3D text, and we've got the SVG, we've got center the pivot, we've got delete by type history, which is very important. Then we've got the freeze transformations. So this is just a lot of the commonly used tools. So not everything is here, but it's commonly used tools. One thing, again, with just like the menu set up here, you can actually create your own custom shelf very easily. I'm going over here, new shelf, and then you can actually bring your own tools here. So instead of having a lot of these, which you might only use maybe 10 of these, you can actually have a smaller window, which is made up of all your favorite tools. It's very cool. And that obviously contains lots of. So we've got our rendering effects, Arnold, Bitfrost, my Go ZBrush, my Mesh editor, my motion graphics, my XGen, my Advanced Skeleton. Advanced Skeleton is a plugin that I have. It isn't natively on Maya, but it's good to get if you want to do some rigging. Cool. So underneath this, to the left here, we've got different ways we can actually select and navigate around the scene. So we've got our pointer selector, lasso selector, paint selector, and then we've got our scale, our translate, rotate, and scale. This little icon here, if I actually go to something like, I don't know, click the cylinder, you see this has changed. If I go to the disk, see this is, oops, see this has changed. This is the last used tool So it's just showing you what tool was used last. So if you're using a tool over and over and over again, that's really good. Underneath this is just viewport. Oops, again, I'm messing up. This is just viewport settings. So this top one here is your perspective, and this allows me just to have my perspective window. I'll bring an asset in just so it looks. So this setting here is just my standard perspective. You can see here at the bottom it says perspect or persp. The one underneath it is my foreview, and this gives me my perspective, my side, which is looking from down the x-axis, my front, which is looking down the z-axis, and my top, which is looking down the y-axis. Very, very useful tool, especially if you're doing anything that needs precision or you just want to keep control of stuff. The one next to it is a 2-view, which is my at this point is set to a front and a perspective, so I can actually affect two things at once. And then the one next to it is the one at the bottom, sorry, is my outliner. So this doesn't change the whole window setup. I can change these back to whatever I want. But this just shows me what is currently inside the scene. So we've got our 4 cameras, perspective, top, front, side. We've got this P-Cube one, this Polycube one that I made. And then we've got the default lighting setup for inside the scene. So that's that. And this is just taking you to the Maya website. So after that, we've got our actual viewport itself. So you can see I've just been switching from different viewports, different settings. These are all very common, so I'm just going to bring your attention to the very top here. We've got another menu set, and these are all, actually I'll bring this to the foreview, because as you can see each one of these views has its own set of menus up here. Now these are really, really cool because each one of these windows can be used separately. You aren't stuck to this viewport. So view gives me all the stuff I can frame all, I can frame the selected, I can, if I change something in the view, I can redo or undo. I can go back to my default view. I can lock the camera, which is very good if you've set up a camera in the scene and you've got a specific animation that you want an angle for. You can lock that camera associated with this view. You get stuff like image planes, which we'll go over. And then after that is shading, and this is where you can actually view or affect how we're actually seeing an object inside the scene. So if I come up to perspective and then go to shading, go to wireframe, you can also see a number here as well. If I click wireframe, you can just see it turns into a wireframe, which is the basic structure of our object. And then if that is smooth shade all, like that. And we've got smooth shave selected item. So I'm going to bring 2 items into the scene just for this as a demonstration. So with this one selected, smooth shade selected items, and anything I select in the scene becomes highlighted. Now there is an issue that, at least in this, my version right here, right, deselect stuff and it goes back to the wireframe, it won't actually select the object. This hopefully is just an issue with my version of Maya, and we're not going to have that issue with yours. But in the outliner here, so I've just opened up my outliner, I can select them, so they are selectable. And you can see here that that one is selected, so it's shaded. This one is selected, so it's shaded. Cool. Underneath that is flat shade all, which would make more sense if I had a spherical object in the scene. There you go. So this is flat shade all. You can see the individual sections of the mesh. If I go to smooth shade all, you see here that it smooths off. So this is giving me an actual representation of what the object looks like. There we go. Now it's being selected. Underneath that is flat shade selected object. So again, the same thing happens like before. We're actually being able to select stuff now, which is cool. It only flat shades what we've got selected. So it's just like the smooth shade one selected, but it's flat shade. And the boundary box basically shows you or displays all the different objects. Boundary box, which is basically a cube or a cuboid shape of the area that object takes up. And there are different settings, so there's X-ray, X-ray object, show wireframe on object, use default shader. So all these are really fun, and I advise you just to have a play and have a look through. So lighting, again, we can change the different lighting. The show, we can turn off objects in the scene. So if I want to turn off geometry, so if the geometry is hidden, go to polygons. There we go. So we can't see the geometry, but if we add something else in the scene, we'll be able to see that and basically hide the geometry and bring it back. Render. So if there was a different render, you could switch to it. And panels. Now this is really cool. So in the minute we're in perspective, but if I want to say turn this window into, let's go back here, I want to change this window to a, I don't know, let's go for a hypershade. Then this portion of the screen is now dedicated to a hypershade, or I can go and I can change that to the outliner. Then this portion of the screen is now dedicated to the outliner. There we go. So it's very, very adjustable, and again, like I was saying before, it's very customizable. And you saw there that I was able to actually adjust the size of these as well, which is very, very cool. And that's just by grabbing these little white dotted lines. I can just move them around and adjust the scales. So if I want this to be a very small menu on the side here, then that gives me a little bit more room to play with this top window here. Okay, so that's the panels. Underneath is basically the quick shortcuts for everything we've just seen. So creating a camera, locking a camera, camera settings, setting up image planes, turning on and off the grid, which is very useful, showing our film gates, our resolution gates, different camera assets, or camera kind of not filters, but camera tools to allow us to keep stuff in frame correctly. And then we've got obviously our different settings for our object, which you can play with. Then we've got something which is really cool, which is the screen space ambient occlusion, which is this little button I've just turned on here. If I actually bring a plane into the scene, I'll show you what that does. So, with it on, with it off, with it on, oh sorry, with it on, with it off. So you can see here that it actually gives me some visual feedback of stuff which is in the scene. I tend to model with this turned on because it's quite nice to see the scene kind of come together. It helps the scene kind of come together more visually. Next to that is motion blur. Turn that on. I think move it does something. No, that's we don't use that too much or at all. The one next to it is basically just the quality. So if we turn this off, you can kind of see that the polygons are, the wireframe is very jagged. See the aliasing, but if we turn that off, see it becomes very, very smooth. So it makes the scene look nicer to look at, but it does have an effect on our runtime, especially when you get a lot of things in the scene, or you've got models which are high resolution. Turning this on and off will definitely have an impact on the scene. Then we've got isolate, which is a very cool tool, which is this one here. So if I have something selected and I only want to see these, I can click that and I only get to see them. Things that are still in the scene, they're just hidden. And then we've got X-ray, and we've got X-ray. If we had a rig in the scene, you can see the rig through the X-ray, which is very cool. So that's that. And again, just have a play with these and just see what you like about them, what you can use in familiarising yourself with the tools. Cool. Turn that on. So on the right side of the screen here, we've got this little box. I want to draw your attention to the very right side of the screen here. We've got these little vertical menu sets. So we've got channel box, layer editor, this is the channel box up here. This is the layer editor down here. We've got the modeling toolkit, and we've got the attributes editor. Now, when I'm clicking these, you can see here that the little blue highlight is shifting. So at the minute we've got the channel box highlighted. So this little stack of paper here is relating to the channel box. This little cube with the hammer is relating to the modeling toolkit. This little three little pegs is relating to the attributes editor. If we click the little figure, we get the human IK system, which is a way to do a basic rig. And then this little hammer and dots is our tool settings. So if we want to change the way a certain tool is used, you can see here as I'm shifting through rotate, scale, and translate, you can see here the tool settings are changing slightly. So this is a tool setting for any of the tools we'll be using. It's very, very useful. Cool. So with something selected, so I've got this cube and the mill selected, you can see here I've got the parameters of this object. I've got its name that I can change, so I can call this cube Bob. I've got the different settings, so you can see here that it's translated slightly negative on the x-axis, it's translated slightly positive on the y-axis, and it's slightly positive on the z-axis. So if I start to move these, you can see how the actual icons, or the numbers actually update. Also, if I just click on the actual word itself, and then I middle mouse drag in the scene, it'll actually move the font as well. Very, very cool. Same for these. So if I want to rotate everything in each one of its axes, I can start doing crazy rotation. Same with scale. If I just want to scale across 2 axes, like that. It's very cool. Then we've got the shape, which is the Bob shape. It's its name. And then we've got the inputs. So inputs is any new primitive we make, we can actually adjust these certain parameters. So I've made a cube, but I want to make this into like a tabletop or something. So adjusting that, and I can also adjust the width and height of the object, the divisions. You can see here if I'm adjusting the width, I'm adding more divisions going down. If I'm adjusting the height, see I'm adding divisions there, and I'm adjusting the depth, I'm adding divisions there. So very, very cool. So that's the channel box. The modeling toolkit is just a load of cool tools that we'll be using a lot to make our modeling life a lot easier. This down here, the quad draw, is going to be used in the second year for our sculptures to bring their topology right down, but still maintain their high quality information. An attribute editor, our object. Oh, we're getting a weird little artifact here for some reason. But this is all the basically the in-depth parameters of our object. So the material that's applied to it, we can adjust the material, which is currently being applied to everything, but we can adjust the material, the translucency, or transparency, the ambient color, the incandescence, is basically how much it glows, the diffuse channel, how much that's being regulated. So that's the right side of the screen. At the very bottom of the screen here, we've got the animation scrub line, which is this line here, with all the numbers in. We've got the extension, or the width of the scrub line. So if we want to have only 1 frame to 12 frame, we can change that. Or if we want to have 152 frames, we can have that. Or we can even adjust it to have let's say 1,000 frames, and then we can also adjust it to be going to 500 frames like that. Very useful. And then we've got the play buttons here. We've got the animation settings here, and then we've got at this very bottom here, which is a very important tool. We've got this little white box here. So if you click that, it brings up this, which is basically everything that I've done inside the scene gets tracked. So if we look at this top menu here and we scrub all the way to the top, you can see here that when I booted Maya up for the first time, this is basically Maya processing all the information, and then you can see here it's giving me some warning signs for some documents it can't find. And then here it's got selecting objects, selecting the object, selecting the light set, adjusting a cube, selecting a cube. So you won't be using this, hopefully you won't be using this a whole lot, but I use this quite a lot to see when something goes wrong. I can look at this and I can try and discern what's the issue. So that's basically a quick overview of Maya. The more you use it, the more you'll understand what these things do, and the more you'll get comfortable with it. It is, when you first open it up, it can be quite not oppressive, but it can be quite a lot of information to take in at the same time. There's a lot of different colours. Some of these have little green borders around them. Why are these blue and these orange? Why are these green? You know, it's really simple. Orange is just anything that is related to polygonal or polygons. So anything to do with like making a polygon, affecting the polygon is right there. Anything with adjusting the like inherent parameters, we've got channel box here, like so I'll move the pivot here. Press S, and there we go. So I'll move the pivot here. This first button here just resets the pivot down to the middle. This button here deletes all the history for the object. You can see there that all that information, if I just do some stuff to it, we can see here that we've got some history. This button here will delete that, and this button here excuse me, this button here will just freeze all this information. So all these translates and scales return to 0. or 1 for the scale, because a 0 in scale would literally mean it's flat. So a 1 is just meaning it's of its correct size. Cool. So the different colours just mean it's for different stuff. So this is sculpting polygons. These are functions used within the tool of the sculpting tool set. Blue is just related to anything that is a NURB based or a curve based surface. Animations, you've got different colours for animation and mesh editor. So the colours just mean a family of functions. So don't worry about that too much at all. Don't worry about that at all. Cool. So I'll just reset the scene, bring myself a new scene up, and I'll just go over navigating the scene as well. So navigating inside Maya is really easy. It's all based around the Alt key on the keyboard. So if I hold Alt, well, if I just click and drag in the scene, you can see here that I'm just dragging a marquee box, a selection box. But if I hold Alt and then left click and drag, you can see I am tumbling and I'm moving around the scene. If I Alt and middle mouse, you can see I pan, so I can actually move the camera side to side, up and down. And if I Alt and right mouse button, you can see I zoom. This is very cool. So Alt left mouse is tumble, Alt middle mouse is pan, and Alt right mouse is zoom. Okay. So bring an asset into the scene just as an example for this next one. So if I'm modeling over here, but I want to focus on something, and I want that to be the main thing in my viewport, if I select the object and press F for focus, I focus it like that, and then I can start tumbling. And because that's my focus, I will tumble around that object. So I can pan and focus. Pan, focus. That's great. Pan, zoom. Great. Cool. So creating assets. So you can either go up to here to create, and then go to polygons, for instance, and go find sphere. Drag out a sphere. Or we can go here on this little quick menu here and let's go for a cylinder, and I can drag out a cylinder. Now, one thing that will be different on your Maya when you first open it up to when I'm going to what I'm using here is that I'm manually making my assets. By default, Maya will have something called interactive creation, which is here, turned off. So if I just click this sphere, it makes a sphere a 1x1 unit sphere, or 2x2 in this case, inside the middle of the scene, which is fine. I personally don't like this. I like to create my objects as much as I can. I want to create my assets myself, but I know some people prefer this. It's personally down to personal taste. So if I click that, it makes it in the middle like that. With it turned off, however, with it turned off, for instance, the sphere. If I just click, so I'm not holding anything, I'm just going to drag on my left mouse, I create a sphere in the middle of the world like that. But if I hold shift and do it, it builds it on top of the world like this. So I'm just holding shift and dragging it out. If I go and click cube, and I'm not holding anything, so just click with my left mouse, I create a black square, which is acting a bit weird. I'm basically making the footprint of the cube, and then my next, you can see here it's giving me this click up to set height. So if I click again and drag up, I can create a height or a depth depending on what I want to do, and then I've got my cube made. Now that wasn't a perfect cube, that was a cuboid. But if I want a perfect cube, I click my cube icon again, I hold shift and I click, it'll create a perfect cube for me like this. Cool. So that's how you create an asset, or a base primitive. And then we want to affect our object. Again, that's very easy. Hovering over my object here, hovering the mouse over itself, I'm going to hold right click, and then you get this little menu up. Ignore this menu at the bottom, this rectangle menu. Just look at the edge, object mode, UV, multiple face, vertex face, and vertex. That's what we want to look at. So if I just hold right click and then hover over face and then release, I'm now in face mode. So you can see as I'm rolling over the surface, it's kind of telling me I can select that face, I can select that face. Okay, if I actually click on that face, it'll turn orange. That means I've got control of that face, and then I can start to move stuff around like that. If I go back, holding right click again, and I want to go to, I want to adjust this corner, the point of this corner. Okay, in the world of 3D, points where these wires meet is called a vertex. These are basically the core base structure of any model. If you don't have vertex, you don't have a structure. You can't build wires without vertex. So I'm going to go to vertex, and you can see it changes to blue with these little red dots. So if I, well, purple dots. If I click one of the dots, you see here I've got control of it, so I can actually start moving it around now. So I can start adjusting the shape like that. So if I want to actually create affect an entire line, again I go back and I go to edge, and I click that, and I can move that around, scale it up, rotate it around, just like that. So that's how we actually affect our object. And a lot of these, so like extrusion, for instance, this tool here, if I select it by face, so holding right click, going to face, selecting this top face, and I click extrusion just once, this little tower, I can actually pull out a face, a new set of geometry from this face, like that. Click it again, and I can scale it in like that. And this extrusion is the tool you'll be using the most out of anything. Okay. Now, one thing you did see me doing is actually shifting from my different ways of affecting, and even getting rid of it all completely. And you can see here that when I do change these, it's actually affecting this little icon here. You can absolutely go over and click these set icons separately, but really simple shortcuts, and if you're a PC gamer, your hand is here 90% of the time. Q for quarter is just our normal selection, so you can see I've got no scale or translate gimbal. I'm just going around selecting objects or selecting surfaces. If I press W, you can see it changes to this one. This is my move tool, so I can actually grab stuff and start to move it around like that. If I press E, that's my rotate. I just start to rotate stuff around using either just a free rotate, or I can actually use one of the edges to rotate around. And if I press R, that gives me my scale. So I can start to scale in different axes or in whatever like that. Really useful. Now, some people get caught up with the fact that none of these actually, you're not using T for translate, you're not using R for rotate, you're not using S for scale. Just get used to Q, W, E, R is your different ways of selecting. And again, there's things that you'll be using the most. Okay. And the last thing I'm going to show you is just changing the viewport from either our perspective window or to one of the 4 views or anything like that. So with my mouse hovered over the viewport, I'm going to tap space. Just tap in space. I'm not going to hold it, I'm just going to tap it. And that'll take me to the 4 view, which is really useful. And then if I want to go to have the front view be my entire viewport, I hover over the front view and tap space like that. And I can keep translating back and forth from this. And I will do this a lot. I'll jump back and forth through different windows. Now, what you can also do is hold space, and then that'll bring up a quick menu for everything. So this, if I just go back here, this menu here is everything. It's all the tool set up here, it's your animation tool set, it's your rigging tool set, it's your rendering tool set. So I can actually get to all my different menu sets just from here. Now, some artists use this quite extensively when they're quickly working through stuff. I tend to make mistakes with this, so I avoid it because I accidentally select stuff that I don't want to select. But one thing we can do with this is, if I'm working in perspective, I can either tap space to come back to this and tap front, or I can hold space and then left hold, click and hold left mouse button in the middle where it says Maya, and then you got perspective view, new camera, right view, bottom view, front view, back view, top view and left view. So I can actually change to different views, which is very cool. Or create a new camera in the scene to then be able to shift to. Cool. So that's a lot of information thrown at you very quickly. Again, don't feel swamped or confused by any of this. This is just a video to either come back to if I'm not around, or just a quick overview. Obviously in class you can ask me all the questions you want. We will be doing a basically this in a more structured class manner. But the last thing I'm going to show you as well is just a very cool one for anyone like me who gets sick of staring at the same colour over and over again. If I hold Alt and press B, you see I'm changing the background. So that, just think of that as alternating background. So I want to alt the background. And I can change that. And you can change the background to be whatever colours you want. I've worked in studios where we were working on very intense, bright coloured dinosaurs. So after you've been staring at that for a long time, your eyes start to kind of strain. So we actually changed the background colour to be something that would take away, if we weren't actually doing colour correcting stuff or anything like that, we would just take away the intensity on our eyes, and it would help us adjust. So you can actually change this in the Windows settings area here. Cool, so that's pretty much it. There'll be more videos obviously about using materials, what materials there are, but just for now this is an overview of Maya. A quick overview. Different versions of Maya are a little bit different. This is Maya 18. Maya 17 is a little bit different. Maya 16 is a little bit different, not majorly. The only things are basically some tools have been removed, or some tools are actually get brought together into a single tool. And we get a few more things, like anything with these green brackets just means it's new to the version, or there are new things on that version. So maybe they've changed the way a certain tool works. So don't worry about that. Hopefully this has helped you. Remember, in class you can just come up to me and say, Dave, I need help with this. What does it mean? What does it do? And we'll help you out. And soon you'll understand how all this works, and you'll start to actually like this viewport quite a lot.